I will say when it comes to politics, it seems like things are calming down just a little bit, Tyler, or?
It depends what you mean by calm, Ronnie.
Well, let's just say we don't want a repeat of January anytime soon.
No.
But to talk a little bit more, let's bring in our good friend, Professor Dave Dulio over at the Oakland University, Professor of Political Science and the Director for the Center for Civic Engagement. Great to have you back with us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I guess we should start off with the governor. There was a new poll out this week. She's taking a bit of a dip in her approval ratings. No surprise, though, with the controversies that have been following her. They've been stacking up.
No, I think a dip in approval ratings is one of the most expected things we could see in a new poll here in Michigan statewide in the last couple of months. As you note, the controversies, the criticism has been almost a drip, drip, drip. And it's, the governor's staff and her handling of it, surprisingly, have turned maybe a 1 or 2 day story into a couple of week story, and something that we're still talking about.
I will say when it comes to the plane and the whole debacle going to Florida, just say you went. No big deal. Just say you went.
Right. And I think a lot, if not most, Michiganders would have looked at that and said, okay, I understand that your dad is sick, you wanted to see him, you had to do this. I think people would be forgiving of that if somebody's upfront about it. But when you try to sneak around, the old adage, the cover-up's worse than the crime, comes back. And I think that it's unquestionably worse now than if the governor would just have been upfront about it. At the same time, maybe this is a little different scenario simply because, even if she would have said and been completely transparent about it, people still probably would have looked at it and said, well, how come you can go, but I can't?
Well, definitely. But I think, too, it's like you said, it's the secrecy behind everything, too. Who was on the plane? Who wasn't on the plane? Oh, the nonprofit's going to pay for it. Well, nonprofit can't pay for it, so they're getting in trouble. And then the owners of the plane were getting in trouble because it's like, well, maybe, no, it wasn't a charter plane. We can't charter it. So it was just every turn there was something.
Right, and that's the drip, 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 right? That turned that. It's not a minor story, but it turned like I said, a 1 or 2 day story into something that keeps bubbling up, and it's going to for the next 18 months or so until we have election day, and it's going to be front and center, I would imagine, from whoever emerges from the Republican primary to challenge her, and without doubt from third-party groups that are going to play an important role in that governor's race.
So speaking of the GOP, I think so many people were taken by surprise with the announcement Detroit Police Chief James Craig may run against Whitmer. I think that would be a pretty interesting matchup. He has a shot.
Oh, I don't think there's any question, and the polling that's been out already that shows a one-on-one matchup with Governor Whitmer and Chief Craig certainly have him within striking distance. And the first one that came out, I think, is notable because it had the governor at 48 and Craig at 42. And I say that that's important for at least two reasons. One, the governor's under 50%. And under 50% against somebody who is new to politics, and this would fold in with the other piece, Craig at 42. We know him very well here in Southeast Michigan as Detroit's chief of police, but I would wonder what his name recognition is on the west side of the state, and certainly up north. If he's at 42 already, without much, I presume, without a ton of name recognition in those heavily Republican areas, he's positioned very, very well for a run at the governor's mansion.
So with that, too, we had the big news this week. Kwame Kilpatrick is staying in Detroit. He says he's not going to be dipping his toes back into politics. Instead, he's going into ministry. I know Kwame. He's going to get involved in politics.
Well, simply saying he's not going to be in politics means he's in politics, right? I mean, it's real simple. And I think that he will absolutely be looked to, and he will be part of the swirl that is politics here in the Southeast Michigan region and across the state.
But is he going to be a part of the swirl on the Democratic side or the Republican side? Because you have to remember, he has a relationship with Trump. And so how is that going to play into, any future?
Such a great question, right? Because there's that uncertainty, but then you pile that on top of the uncertainty around the role that former President Trump may or will have in the 2022 election cycle, and it just becomes an even bigger swirl, almost sort of a tornado of activity here that we don't know how it's going to turn out. And it's a big if, right? If James Craig emerges from a Republican primary in the governor's race, and I say it's a big if because there are others who are going to vie for that, who are going to pick up on some political dynamics that are at work in our state. Like I said, he's positioned very well, but it's far from a guarantee that he emerges from that primary. But if he does he campaign with the president? Does he ask the president to come? What is that relationship? What is that dynamic like?
That really is setting up the state of Michigan to be such a key player in this upcoming election as well. And I'm wondering too, because you have people, Peter Meijer, he's a freshman, but still he is someone to contend with, and people are listening to him. And one thing he's been doing is speaking out about the conservatives. Is that going to hurt or help the Republican Party?
Well, I think the status of the GOP right now is one of flux and one of a battle, right? I mean, it's really this sort of internal civil war among the Republicans to figure out what the direction of the party is going to be. And as you know, right, on one side, you've got folks like Peter Meijer, who have called folks to the carpet, but on the other side, you've got folks in leadership for instance, the U.S. House of Representatives, when somebody like Representative Cheney comes out and makes similar statements, makes similar pronouncements, she gets stripped of her leadership position. And that's really interesting to me because the person who took her place, Representative Stefanik, was actually less of a supporter of the Trump agenda in the U.S. House than Representative Cheney was. So it's interesting how things shift and change and perspectives differ as other developments occur. So, but to get back to where we started this, there really is that going to continue to be that battle between sort of I don't want to say moderate, but maybe the more establishment, traditional Republican wing of the party and the Trump wing of the party. And I'm not sure we're going to know who wins that until we see the results of the 2022 cycle.
It really is like sitting back and watching a sport. Politics is a dirty game.
Well, it's rough and tumble, that's for sure, right? I mean, it's dog eat dog. All those goofy cliches are true, right? It's knock down, drag out for sure. And we've seen that. It seems like we see it every election cycle here in Michigan, whether it's a campaign, certainly at the presidential level last time, or the John James, Gary Peters race last time, or the John James, Debbie Stabenow race 2 years before that, right? And we're going to see some of those races again in 2022.
With that as well, if we can talk about President Biden, I think he's going to have a hard time with his restructuring plan with the transportation, because he can't even get the country to 70% vaccination rate, which has been such a cornerstone of his messaging from day one of taking office.
Sure, and one of the difficulties with setting a goal like that is that your opponents know what it is, and if you fall short of it, which it appears that we're going to on that by the 4th of July, that they can take political advantage of it, and that's going to continue to be the case. I think that the president is going to hit a rough patch here. Not that it's been totally smooth sailing thus far, but I think he's going to hit a rough patch. Who knows where this infrastructure debate's going to go? It doesn't look like he's got the votes, even from within his own party, to pass the Democrats' a big initiative on election reform, right? So if Democrats can't even keep their own folks on board, how are they going to get Republicans to come and join in the U.S. Senate to reach that 60 vote threshold that they need to under the current rules?
And talking about election reform as we head into another election cycle season here in the state of Michigan, it's still a big controversy. Do the laws and rules and regulations around how we vote need to be changed?
Oh, I think that depends who you ask. Right, and maybe I'll say it this way. I think a lot of people in Michigan would say yes, but their definition of what needs to be changed and how it changes would be dramatically different depending on who you talk to.
So with that, as you're going into a new season of teaching these young minds about the wonderful political process here in the United States of America, are they excited? Does the controversy really spark a debate amongst some of your students?
I think it piques their interest. And I think that you see that in our enrollments in courses like Introduction to American Politics, which is it's the big survey course. Our enrollments have always been good in that class, but they've been stronger in recent years. And I think controversy, like, it's a similar dynamic that's maybe in the press, right? Where sensational stories get attention. Well, when we have the kind of politics we've been having for the last several years, I think that gets attention as well. And young people say to themselves, hey, maybe I should know a little bit more about that.
Dave Dulio with us here on the MegaCast. He's the professor of political science and the director of the Center for Civic Engagement at Oakland University. With that, though, I feel like the students have a harder time now because there's so much noise on the internet. How do you guide them to, really take the time to do some homework to, understand what they're reading to try to get legitimate facts out of the information?
Sure. I think one of the big lessons that it's for students and for anybody in the public, really, any consumer of media, including you and me, would be to know the sources that you're turning to and know what their biases are, right? Everybody's got bias. I think there's no question about that. And even news sources lean one way or the other. There are some good tools out there to help folks figure out which news source leans which way. I mean, some we can point to and say, yep, that's a lefty news source, or that's a conservative news source. There's an organization out there that does really good work. It's called All Sides, and they've got a rating of different news organizations to let folks know sort of which way each one of them leans. And if consumers of information are armed with that knowledge, they can say, okay, I read this piece on this site and it leans left. Maybe I'll go try to find a similar story from a place that leans to the right, and try to triangulate and figure out, okay, I've heard from both sides. The truth's probably in the middle.
It's really sad that we have to operate like that because, the role of the journalist is to be the watchdog for the community, and that's not happening. I think a perfect study is just to look at the immigration issue right now, how it was portrayed and relayed through the news media under Trump and now under Biden. It really is fascinating to watch that play out.
No doubt about it. And I think the one of the biggest issues that we confront with news media, with consuming information, is the blurring of the line between reporting and opinion. And that's not me saying this. And I'm going to cite a study from the Rand Corporation that was done a few years back. It's called Truth Decay. A pretty catchy little title, right? Truth Decay. And they had 4 big pillars of sort of what's wrong with the press these days. And that was one of them, that there's too much blurring of a line between factual reporting and opinion. And I think that's where, if you're going to get biased, that's where it's going to seep in.
We're talking with Dave Dulio here on the MegaCast from Oakland University. And with that, we always like to check in with you for the center. Anything going on, or are you guys taking the summer off?
We're taking a bit of a hiatus over the summer, and it's really because when we've got such great summer weather in Michigan, not as many people are interested in tuning into a Zoom meeting on politics right over on a nice Michigan summer night. So we'll come back in the fall with a lot of great programs. And I hope you'll have me back to talk about those details.
So with that too, are you teaching back in person right now?
We will be in the fall. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Are looking forward to it, or do you kind of like Zoom?
No, I'm zoomed out. Enough's enough.
I think we all are. And I'm never even, before the pandemic, I never understood the students that would take online classes, because to me, it's that debate. When you're in a classroom, it's the debate and the conversation. It's not about the actual lesson. You can read a book on your own, but it really is trying to have those conversations that are so important in a classroom.
Yeah, the interaction that is missed is, it makes it, I'll just say it, it's an inferior way of doing things, especially in the kind of courses that we do in the poli-sci department.
So with that too, if I can ask you just another minute or two here with you on the MegaCast, do you feel like the students will be excited? And is it a safe place for them? Because now I feel like so many people feel like they can't say anything because you're going to offend someone. And we've seen careers sideline over what could be somewhat of an innocent statement.
Well, I can't control what's going to offend somebody else, right? So then let me make sure I'm going to answer your question correctly. Are you talking about how I approach things in the classroom, or how other students would interacting with their peers?
The students interacting with their peers.
I think what I do in those situations is just set the ground rules, right? And say, look, if we're going to have this discussion, this is how it's going to go.
Be nice, be kind, but debate an issue.
Right. And you know what? Just because somebody has a different opinion than you do doesn't make them the devil.
That is so true. And we know that, right? I mean, Stephen Henderson, Nolan Finley, they're great examples of that. I always say too, Professor, by the way, you can't offend me, because then that means that your opinion matters more than my opinion of myself. So talk away. Go ahead.
Great way to look at it. Yeah, great way to look at it.
You know, I've been called more things on the internet than you could imagine. It's okay. Go ahead. It says more about who you are as a person, than what it says about me. That's my rant for the day. Professor Dulio with us. We appreciate your time as always. Have a great summer. Any big plans?
Oh, you know, a little bit here and there. Vacations with the family. Sticking around town a lot, though. Playing a lot of golf at the great OU golf courses.
Oh, golf. My husband, by the way, he has to play on Monday to practice for Tuesday. And then, of course, you've got to practice at least a couple other days to practice for that Tuesday league as well.
Right. Makes sense.
Well, I hope your game improves over the summer.
Thank you. So do I.